Welcome to Business Uncomplicated. Today, we're tackling a question every organization needs to answer. What's actually wrong with leadership, and how do we fix it? Our guest is Kristy Morgan, president of Apex Leadership Partners, an authorized Crestcom business owner based here in Denver. Before she started transforming managers into great leaders, Kristy spent nearly 2 decades in the trenches of engineering, supply chain, and program management at companies like Tesla, Meta, and EY. She managed $10 million data center deployments across multiple continents, driven high voltage programs from concept to mass production, led cross functional teams through some of the most demanding environments in tech. She's also a PMP and an active member of the PMI Mile High chapter. So, why did somebody with a pedigree like this walk away from the corporate world to focus on leadership development? The reason is because she kept on seeing the same problem everywhere she went. Brilliant people burning out, checking out, or being pushed out, not because of their lack of talent, but because their organization forgot they were human. Today, Kristy's going to break down what's missing in how we develop leaders, why business problems are really people problems in disguise, and provide a few practical frameworks you can start using tomorrow. So we welcome Kristy and let's get into it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome, Kristy, to Business Uncomplicated. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We are good. We're excited to talk to you.
Likewise.
We're going to jump right into it and put you in the hot seat with what is wrong with leadership today? It's a loaded question.
Yes.
So, we're going to get into what it is you do, but before we do, we're going to start with the provocative question of, what's kind of the state of leadership today and what's going on?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of answers to that question, but I'll stick with one for now that I see in a lot of clients. Leadership has this feeling that people have gotten into the roles that they're in because they're really good at what they do. And they think they have to continue to be really good at what they do to be good leaders. And that's not actually a necessity. They're no longer in charge of getting results themselves. They're now in charge of motivating their people to get results. And that's a totally different skill set. Being good at your job versus getting other people to be good at their jobs is a pretty different way of working and being. And I think that's a focus that a lot of leaders are really stuck on is I was really good at this thing. I'm going to keep being good at this thing and people are going to be, following in my footsteps. But understanding that people are motivated by different things and we're all unique individuals who require kind of a customized leadership experience, I think is a huge area of opportunity for a lot of leaders that I see.
I think that that makes a lot of sense, and I think we can probably all relate to that either personally or from people who we've seen. But break it
Yep.
down for us in terms of okay, what's missing and what should as organizations are putting people into those positions, what's missing in terms of their training that real true leadership training, not just by example, but by to your point, helping others and facilitating their road.
Yeah, I think the recognition that we are all unique, we all have different learning styles, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different paths, requires leaders to adapt the way that they lead based on the people who are in their charge. So it's like every individual that is on your team may have a different method of learning. Some people may be more visual, some people may be, you know, they learn by doing. And it's really up to the leader to figure out those individual tendencies and adapt the way they teach, the way they mentor, the way they coach. All of those things that are really important with leaders have to be customized to the people. And that's, I think, the heart of it is it's a people thing. It's not just a one size fits all that works in organizations to say, okay, command and control, do it this way. If you really want to motivate your teams and get them to be effective with what they're doing, it requires a dialogue back and forth. There you have to get to know your people as individual humans and figure out what it is that's going to work for them.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because through the course of a lot of conversations we've been having around AI and all that, and seemingly everybody thinks the robots are coming to take over the world, right? And we're going to be, working for Skynet, but the human element keeps on coming up, and it's whether it's training, whether it's leadership, whether it's just how we're going to transform in this new world of AI. People, I think, have almost found a new respect or a new need for us as you
Huh?
versus, or it was all about like, well, let's digital transformation. Let's automate everything. Let's automate everything. So talk about the uniqueness. I would suspect that's hard for me as a leader to understand the unique stylings of everybody on my team. So how do you approach that?
Well, it starts with curiosity and it starts with leadership understanding that it's a two-way street. And so getting to know your people, whether that's in your one-on-ones or your team building or the different exercises that you do when you take on a leadership role to kind of get the lay of the land and understand where things are. It's not just about metrics and KPIs and all those things that we love to focus on, especially us analytical types who just want to look at the numbers. But there's so much nuance to the human being. Like it's funny. Someone asked me the other day if you could go back to school, would you still study engineering? And I said, you know what, I'd study psychology. And that's a weird thing, especially for a lot of us who were so focused on science and math and engineering and those topics. But there's so much that's fascinating about us as human beings and what actually gets us out of bed in the morning, makes us excited about doing our jobs and makes us effective. So it's that curiosity that the leaders need to understand. It's not just something you can figure out and plug and play and just use that same method on repeat.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Christy, with understanding that we want to take the analytical approach, but we also need to keep everybody moving in the same direction. Break it down. What are we looking for in terms of leadership development that would get somebody to practically really do this? What does that look like? Because I know, like, sometimes I don't even have a clear vision of what my team is. I know what my team is supposed to be doing maybe for a number, but that doesn't
Mhm.
account for all of the individual processes in order to get it done. So how do I break that down as a leader? What do I need to be doing, or what training do I need to be asking? What's it look like in reality?
A great example, I think that will ring true for the analytical types is if you've ever done any training in like Six Sigma and have done, lean manufacturing processes or anything like that, you learn about the 5 whys of root cause analysis. So it's not just, okay, this thing broke, why did it break? You go back all the way to get to the root. And so you typically want to ask at least 5 levels of why to get to that root cause. And guess what? You can use that same thing on people. Understanding individuals' whys, understanding why they're in the role that they're in, understanding why they're at the company that they're at, understanding why, like asking those why questions when it comes to individuals to understand. Because we all have different reasons, and some people choose their work because of the mission. Some people choose their work because of their coworkers. A lot of us choose the work because of the leaders. But there's so many of those why questions that you can ask and not stopping at that surface level, but continuing to dig down. It's really insightful, not just for the person asking the questions, but for the employees as well. It can sometimes make them dig a little deeper. And I'm not talking about like going into therapy with your boss, but there's a lot that sometimes we don't even realize what motivates us that is beneficial for not only that working relationship, but to help us really kind of understand what are the things that energize us, what are the things that help us, and what are the things that are not useful. And so kind of that that, again, back to the curious mindset and always wanting to know more, take that 5 way approach and put it to, the human element.
That's super, super interesting. And I'm thinking about that in practice. I'm like, okay, where is that fine line where you're like, ooh, now this feels a little bit awkward. But I can see where
Yeah.
it would be really valuable on both sides to really be just upfront about why are you here? Like, let's be real. What are you looking for? Is it upward track? Is it flexibility? Is it, all of those many questions? But
Hmm.
where do you see with your clients just getting over that awkwardness? Because I could see that feeling really intrusive sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think you probably don't want to just like start off jumping into, digging deep right away. It starts with the building the relationship as well. So, one of the things that I recommend to a lot of my clients is the structure of their one on ones. Sometimes we like to try to push what is important to the organization and sharing things, but a one on one is really meant for the employee to share with their supervisor or their skip level or their leadership team what it is that's important to them. So we do a 3 by 3 by 3 style of 3 things that are going well, 3 things that you want to improve, and 3 things of your choosing, as personal or as impersonal as you want. And at that point, you can get to know how much that employee is willing to share. Some people will share a lot more about their personal life and about things that are going on at home and things that aren't necessarily questions that you can ask them. But when you give them the opportunity to share, you not only can understand the backdrop of what it is that is going on in their life that may be affecting how they show up at work, but also how much they're willing to open up and be vulnerable. And then you can tailor the conversations you're having about the deeper stuff based on how well you get to know them in those conversations.
Yeah, and we love a good framework.
Mhm.
Always positive. Because when you were talking about the why before, I equated it to, we've all been through technology programs. We'd always say to our business analysts, when you're engaging with the business, ask why like 1,000 times, because I can tell you the reason why they're telling you and the real root cause of what needs to be done, they haven't probed on, right?
Yes.
That should resonate with people like that comparison. But when you
So true.
one on ones, because we've all been told this in our career all along. Oh, the one-on-one is for you to bring the agenda. You should bring the agenda. But we never teach people what an agenda for a one-on-one looks like. And depending on the level of your boss, it can be intimidating to think about how to approach that conversation. So for myself, I used to work for the EVP. And of course, he was a very busy guy. And he was always, so when you think about approaching him, or people would come to me and say, well, how do I approach him? Be like, well, he's really approachable. He's a good guy. But there was no structure to say, well, here's how you should do it for your benefit, not his benefit. He's going to, you engage him, he's going to talk and he's going to tell you what he thinks. But if you didn't get anything out of that conversation, so I like how you said, like, here's the 3 things that are going well. Here's the 3 things that maybe I need your advice or your guidance on. And then I like the other 3 things, which could be, just a connection point, building that personal relationship. So I like dividing it because in somebody's mind, it's also the way you could divide the time.
Mhm.
Because because I'll ask that question is, how do you coach people on addressing time with leaders? Because like, listen, gotta go to the next meeting, gotta go to the next meeting. I saw a thing on LinkedIn today. It goes, what's your job? Email meeting. And they're like, what does that mean? Like, I send an email and I go to a meeting. I send an email, I go to a meeting. They're like, but what's your job? Well, send emails. And so
I bet a lot of people feel like that's their job these days.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you coach people around that leadership? Either leaders making people feel comfortable with that, or vice versa. People who, how do you feel comfortable approaching your leaders?
I think a lot of it comes from establishing those guidelines. Like maybe it's a leader who is taking over a team, or maybe it's somebody who gets newly promoted, or maybe it's just a team that's kind of dysfunctional and you want to start fresh. But whatever situation it is that you realize that you want to start to set those ground rules or create those frameworks, I think just a really level set, kind of high level meeting to say, listen, I'm going to walk into this situation knowing that there are probably some people who are going to resonate with this and there are some people that aren't. But letting your people know that you want to make this comfortable for them and you want to make this a two-way street in those conversations is it's like starting with a clean slate, saying, okay, maybe we did things one way in the past, or maybe this is how things have been working up till this point, but that doesn't mean that's how they need to be in the future. Like, we all love New Year's resolutions. We're still in January. You can keep going for a few months and still pull that New Year's thing and say, let's look at what's going to work for us. Here's my suggestion. What do you think about it? Asking for feedback and asking for, your team to contribute their ideas of what it is they find would be useful. And again, it's about tailoring that. It may not work the same way with every single individual on the team. And it may be intimidating for some people, like 3 by 3 by 3 might seem like a lot of stuff that they have to prepare. Okay, start with 1 by 1 by 1. Like, it doesn't have to be the same thing that works for everybody. But if a leader comes to the table and says, here's what I'm thinking about, this is what we're going to try, and then asks for feedback on what they want, it becomes more of a collaboration that can allow people to really feel like they're part of that structure and part of the what's the word I'm looking for? Like they'll have ownership into it and get that buy-in. So
Right. There was a old boss from Salesforce, and he was on a podcast or he was being interviewed, and he was talking about coming up in his career. And he said, when I was coming up in my career, I'd sit in these rooms and I'd hear leaders say things. And I didn't want to say anything against that because I was afraid I'd get fired. Then I rose in the ranks and he got to C level, he's a very effective guy in a lot of well-known companies. And then he goes, and then I developed imposter syndrome. And so now I was getting more prominent in my career. And so I started feeling a little more comfortable speaking up. And then I felt like a fraud. And he kind of went through this psychological journey as a leader. It
mhm.
made me think like, okay, so if you as a leader who have risen to those ranks, because a lot of us who maybe haven't been at the C level think, oh, these guys get it dialed in. They know what's going on. I need to learn from them. And it was refreshing to hear a leader be so vulnerable and say, yeah, I sat in your seat and I don't want to say anything either because I was afraid I was going to get fired. Well, if you felt like that and you made it up there, how does everybody else in those seats feel? And do you think there's enough vulnerability within leadership today that allows the employee, whether they're new coming up or even established employees who've been doing it 20, 30 years and just are never going to get to that executive level, but are trying to improve their careers?
I think it exists, but it's rare. There are leaders who are comfortable with that. I have met a few recently who are absolutely willing to be vulnerable and show that they've had challenges, that they still have challenges, that guess what? They're human and we all make mistakes and we all sometimes pick a path to go down that isn't the right path, whether that's an organizational decision or some software that we decide to implement that isn't right for the team. We've all been there. And so it's kind of like you take those retrospectives and those lessons learned that we do after every big consulting project or every big implementation, right? And you actually look at those in not just, who screwed up and how do we not do that again, but leaders should be owning up to the things that the role that they played that may or may not have affected the way something was able to be executed or not. And so those lessons can really be taken to a whole new level if you have people willing to share. And I've seen leaders lately who are willing to do that, and it opens up just a lot broader dialogue, and you can get so much more out of it and learn not just that, yeah, we're all fallible, like this can happen to any of us, but also you'll then be able to get more ideas from people who are willing to share. If their leader says, hey, I might not have had the right idea on this, you'll have more people who are then willing to echo that and share the things that they've felt. And I think that as hard as it can be, those types of realizations really affect the entire team's ability to share the truth and not just try to sugarcoat stuff and blame it on a vendor or blame it on a piece of the puzzle that then they can just say, okay, that was the fault. Let's move on. Because if you actually want to get better, you really want to look at all of those individual, components that play into it. And a lot of them are human related.
So we talked before about business problems are really people problems in disguise, and I love that phrase. Give us some examples of, okay, so now we see some of the challenges, but where does this manifest, and then how do companies combat that?
Yeah, I was talking about this to a friend of mine recently, and he and I met through the PMI group, the Project Management Institution. Our chapter here in Denver is huge and it's a very active group. We do a ton of events. And I connected with my friend Jeff because he's not just a CIO who is running a large, he's always doing new projects and things for the organization, but he's also somebody who really understands people and leadership and the soft side of things. I hate the soft skills term, but that's what it is. And we really
We know what you're
related
talking about.
because and we were talking about change management, and we were talking about change management in scope of software implementations. And you can do everything right from the perspective of, getting the right people on board, getting your risk registers, planning the schedule, planning contingencies. You can do all of those things. But if you don't get the people on board with the why behind it, that entire project can fail. And you can waste hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that could have worked if you had just a very, very simple kind of kickoff to get everybody on board and to help them understand the why behind it, to get their feedback, to get their buy-in. And that's not just at a leadership level, but it's all the way across the board. Anybody who's going to have to use that technology, change management is so influenced by the actual people doing the work that it was a huge lesson for an organization that went through this, because at the end of the day the project was scrapped and they moved on, and there was a huge sunk cost there that was they were never going to get back. And it really could have been a different story if they would have just focused on the people and how that change was going to affect them. And it was a pretty great lesson, a painful, expensive lesson, but one that I think really resonates with that business people problem
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah,
Word.
we see that in our work, and Rich and I were just talking about this. Like, what are the first things to be cut in a projects going, if it's going sideways or even if it's not, it's just you're looking at it and it's a ridiculously large price tag. What can we take off of this? And change management training, more of those softer elements are some of the first things
Mhm.
to go. We'll figure it out. We've got really smart people.
Mhm.
It'll be fine. But you're right. If they're not going on that journey with you, it's going to be really, really difficult because it will be stressful. Change in general is stressful,
Yeah.
and got to make sure that they are rooted in that. And it does take a strong leader to say, no, 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 we've got to care for our people who will be the ultimate ones who are, you know making this change, whatever, whether it's a technology or just a simple process change as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's an interesting, this has always been one of my frustrations with leadership is, you look at yearly planning and then we build out the roadmap and we'd start working on these projects and everybody looks quarter to quarter, but we just set a roadmap that might be 12, 24 months to reach that goal. But they're like, oh, well, in the first quarter, sales weren't great. So now we're going to scrap all these projects. But these projects weren't intended to pay off for another 2 years, guys. We
Mm.
got to stop this project because the whole reason we're doing it is to get more sales or improve our product or whatever the reason is. So, how in a leadership setting do you talk to the fact that business is long-term thinking, in some cases strategy, it's customer relationships, it's employee relationships, and those things do not have an expiration date. They do not matter whether Wall Street tanks tomorrow. Those relationships are based on other things. So how to, in a leadership setting, how do you kind of coach people, or how does the training that you offer kind of weave that in, or does it?
I'm not sure that I'm looking at things from that same perspective as the short term versus the long term. I'm not all things when it comes to whether it's, strategic planning or operations or HR or talent. Like, I'm really focused on individuals and behavior change, the investment in those individuals and behavior change that I hope can affect things like that long-term strategy and being less reactionary when it comes to those ups and downs quarterly. But I mean, I got out of the corporate world and the organizations that mostly cared about what their shareholders were thinking and what Wall Street was doing because I was sick of that type of planning. And so the businesses that I work with now are smaller businesses. My favorite clients are working for organizations that are ESOPs or employee owned organizations because they are so much more invested and they're not just looking at what the stock ticker is doing or what the latest buzz or trend is. It's the focus on the employees who are really they're owners in the company and therefore have a much greater stake that they want to focus on keeping their culture and to training people even when they're growing and scaling. And we all know the bigger you get, the harder it is to keep that same culture and values. And so that's where I'm putting my energy is on those companies that have people who care about the individual actions that they can take to affect their own behavior, to affect their team's behavior. And then at the end of the day, I see that impacting their bottom line because they can actually, you can put numbers to these things. You can put, if you want, if we get the finance types in the room and they want to see ROI, you can put that to training even though these soft skills sometimes seem harder to quantify, when you can basically every month track your action plans and say, this is how much time it saved, this is how much over we reduce, this is the improvement in retention or employee satisfaction or all these other things. Like, you can put numbers to it and you can show that over time that reinforcing these behaviors and skills that may not seem as tangible actually do have a long-term impact.
I
So
love
then,
that.
yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I was gonna say I love that, and I'm with you. It's so inspiring when you work with companies who have typically have their customer. They understand their customer potentially better than the customer themselves, and it's so nice to see that rhythm and that real cohesion. I think in companies that do it well. I'm wondering when you're talking about the individuals, because at the end of the day, it is all about the individuals. I'm wondering
Yes.
what particular behaviors or competencies do you see in those individuals at those really well-oiled machines that you're working with?
So, kind of going back to what we started with at the beginning of the conversation, recognizing that as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers. Being able to ask good questions is actually what makes you more successful. And I see also the humility of knowing that you're not always going to be perfect at everything, and having the mindset that you can continually get better and continually learn. Like, when you have people who are lifelong learners who love signing up for new trainings, new certifications, a new degree. It's those types of people who are going to do really well because they recognize it's not just, okay, I went through this training, I checked this box, I'm going to move on and I'm going to get back to work. It's like, how do you actually implement that? And so there's a lot of skills that are super valuable that are going to continually evolve. And so I think there's probably a few that are a big focus for us in this kind of space with our leaders. And that's the empathy and recognizing that, again, everything you do is unique to their, whether it's the environment, whether it's the team, whether it's the project that you're implementing. And it's a constantly evolving process. So there's that learning mindset, there's that growth mindset. And then I'd say the third thing is for me, it's the understanding that we are all scared about what's going to happen with AI. We are all scared about what's happening with the economy. There's so much pressure out there from a job security standpoint. Some people may feel like they don't want to share because we're all afraid. And so I think that being honest and allowing that dialogue about what it is that is affecting us in our jobs, in our personal lives, in our family lives, all of that empathy that you can bring to the workplace. It's not that we all just want to be soft and, pretend that it's just this big kumbaya moment, but recognizing that all of the stuff that's going on in our world is really stressful for business owners as well as employees. That vulnerability and that honesty of talking about those things and how that impacts how we come to work is an area of opportunity, I think.
So you talked early on in the intro, we talked about your background, engineer, Stanford, Tesla, a lot of big names in that intro. What made you make the shift? You're talking a lot about empathy and leadership, and so now you have a company that's focused on that. That wasn't where you started, so why was this important to do for you?
I decided to make this shift and transition out of the hardcore engineering, problem solving, you know, AI data center world, not because it wasn't something that I just decided to say, okay, I'm done with this, I'm bored with this, I'm moving on, but I saw the same challenges in those organizations over and over. And regardless of whether I was working in consulting or working in tech or working in manufacturing, I saw the same pattern of great people who were accomplishing amazing things who would eventually leave the organizations or would get pushed out of organizations or would basically just burn out because they weren't being treated as humans. They weren't being recognized. Like you can only burn the candle at both ends for so long. You can only shift under these operating conditions of, okay, we're going to chase this squirrel and then we're going to chase this squirrel. And then this is the new thing. And, here's this timeline. You're just going to compress it and you're going to do everything in less time. Like you can only do that for so long. As much as there's always going to be a pipeline of new talent and young engineers who are willing to jump in and do that, you lose so much from that lack of kind of consistency throughout the organization. I mean, there's so much knowledge that you lose when a talented person leaves an organization by choice or being forced out that can't be replicated. And yeah, you can get fresh labor in there to make, you know, someone else who's going to just continue to work 15-hour shifts. But at the end of the day, if you just keep doing that and you're just burning through people, that culture isn't sustainable. And I think for me, after seeing it in so many different environments, I just realized that I didn't want to be not only I didn't want to be burnt out like that, but I didn't want to burn out the people who were working for me. And that was not a choice that I was given. You see a lot of managers who are being forced to look at their talent and say, okay, here's the bottom 10%. We're going to get rid of these people. And it puts you into a position where, you can't just justify, you can't save everybody. And I hated that. Like, not that I think it's realistic to keep everybody all the time, but it was no longer something that I could align myself with. And I felt like there was a huge opportunity for companies to recognize that if they invest in their people and if they spend that time actually making the culture a place where people want to stay, you can see huge results from that. That, guess what? Affect that bottom line. So maybe you don't have to lay those people off to begin with. There's so many ways that that can affect people. And so I just decided it was time for me to work with companies and to focus on those skills that I knew could make a difference. And I had to go out on my own to do it.
I love it. And I think a lot of people relate to that too. We've all seen that or been part of that for sure. For sure. So now at Apex Leadership Systems, tell us what do your typical engagements look like when customers and your clients bring you on? What does that look like?
So I always start off at the beginning of an engagement with a client by doing a leadership skills workshop. And we look at the things that are working well and we look at what people's strengths are, but then we also give them space to talk about challenges. And we look at individuals and we say, okay, what are the skills that you want to work on? And this doesn't mean you have to admit, like, I'm bad at communication. We can all get better at communication. So it's not just here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm bad at, but here are the things that I'm good at, and here are the things that I know I want to improve. And that realization for a leadership team can be a great way to start off the bat, so that you know the areas people want to focus on. And it's also a great way to see who's engaged in that learning mindset and who's not, because I don't want people in my classes who don't want to be there. It's not detention. It's not getting in trouble. It's not, here, we're going to send you to leadership training. The best organizations will put together a cohort of their future leaders that they say, these are the people we want to invest in. And those people have a choice to opt in. And maybe it's not the right time in their life. Maybe they've got other stuff going on. I only want people who have the time to be there and who want to be there. And so we start off with that, and we start off with some exercises and some areas to put words to the problems that they have, because no organization is perfect. We all have challenges. We all have things that, maybe it's our customer service metrics, or maybe it's our internal recruiting processes. Like, we want to get all that stuff out on the table, and then we want to help, and I want to be a guide for, I don't want to tell them what they should focus on. I want them to decide. So we use some great tools on basically coming to consensus in a really fast way to agree on things that they want to focus on. And the biggest thing in all of my trainings is we want to put together action plans, and we want to put goals with those action plans that have real results. So we start off right away in that workshop by saying, here's what we think we can achieve if we make these changes. And then with our program, I like to see my clients involved in an entire 12-month program, so that they can not only get the benefit of all of the different modules and workshops that we teach, because Crestcom is the parent company, the franchise that has basically developed this curriculum, and they work with educational psychologists around the globe to say, okay, how do we help people learn this effectively? And then we worked with CEOs and business owners to say, what are the skills that are most important for your leaders? And with the combination of that, we put together a 12-month program. Excuse me. And that 12-month program is really focused on that behavior change we talked about. So each month you're learning a new topic, and you're not just moving on and going to the next thing. You're taking that topic, you're putting together an action plan, and I'm holding you accountable for that action plan. So it's a learn, implement, track the results, and then you're continually doing that over a 12-month rolling cycle so that you can essentially come out of that with not just all of these skills you've learned, but then you'll have your entire stack of action plans that are tracked in our portal to say, here are all the great things I've achieved. And so there's that kind of repetition, and it gets you motivated to continue to learn and to continue to get better when you see those results. It's very much it's based in the behavioral psychology of that progress and how much that then feeds your contributions moving forward. So that's the ideal best case situation of working through a program like that. But there's all sorts of different opportunities if an organization is short on time, or if they just have a specific pain point, or if there's different focus areas, we can drill deep into those and we can focus on workshops for broader parts of the organization. We can also focus on groups that are future leaders. We can focus on groups who are leaders who maybe have more to learn in the roles that they're already in. And I like to be able to adapt to the needs of my client, but I also recognize that there is science and research and results that we have that show that sustained behavior change is a lot more effective when you're practicing that behavior and you're repeating it over and over and seeing those results.
Yeah. When you initially start in the beginning, what are the most common gaps you're seeing within leadership? You touched on communication, touched on
Yeah.
vulnerability. Like what are you seeing is not maybe the most common reason why they come to you, but
Mhm.
you are starting to engage. What are the themes that come up most often?
The most common areas that I see where organizations will be able to see the benefits right away is when we focus on communication, delegation, and accountability. And
Yeah.
communication is a thread that goes throughout all of the skills that we teach. But the exercise that we start off in the first leadership skills workshop is really around communication being a two-way street. And so I like to use the example of a two-way radio. It's not just, hey, here's what I'm telling you to do, but it's the person saying, okay, this is what you told me to do, and this is what I'm going to go do. Like, we do an exercise called the afters, and it's thinking about, I'm going to tell you to go do something, but I want to have you do it right the first time. So I need to think through, in my head, I already know what I think is you're going to do, or what I would do if this was given to me. But there's a lot more that goes into the assigning of a project that you can do to make sure that that's understood. So it's not just go do this thing, it's what do we want to achieve after this thing is done. And that's actually more important than here are the steps that you want to do. It's why are you doing it? It's what are the results that we want to achieve after. And then thinking through all of those future based questions that an individual may need to ask in order to really understand what it is they're being instructed to do and really understand what it is that those results should achieve. And if you just spend 5 to 10 minutes focusing on how you give someone an assignment and what are all of the variables or questions or things that they need to know, you can not only be more effective at giving that assignment, but then letting them ask questions and having that back and forth can save you so much time later on down the road. They're going to do it right the first time, or they're going to be comfortable asking the questions of the details. But like, if you just say, okay, here's the assignment, any questions, go, you're going to end up with a lot more failed projects or read work or opportunities that won't be executed as well than if you say, okay, here's what you need to do, and here's the why, and here's what I expect out of it, and what are your questions. It's making them understand that back and forth is part of that assignment, and they don't get to start until they really truly understand what it is they're supposed to do. And that's a huge area that helps right off the bat. So we always like to start right there.
Yes, that's going through my head where I'm like, oh, yes, we need to be doing this starting tomorrow with some projects right now. Absolutely. Yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. When you engage with the companies. You talked about ROI, and it's a good ROI story.
Everyone does.
Companies typically expect from an ROI. You said they can measure it through your portal, I believe, right?
Yes,
So it's 12 months. When does the ROI start manifesting? And how does it
immediately.
manifest?
Immediately. We'll start tracking from the very first month in those action plans. And I've had clients before say, "Oh, well, we can't invest in this until we show a quarter that we're profitable." And I I'm not a pushy person. I don't like to just try to shove this program down their throat. If they're not ready, they're not ready. But for every client who waits and then starts later, they always regret waiting because they start to see those results right away and they think, if only I would have started this sooner, I would have been able to start experiencing this and had less frustration, less talent loss, less, you know, rework on my projects. And so you'll start to see those results from the very first action plan reporting. So that could be as early as, 3 or 4 weeks into the program. But overall, when we track the results from our clients over a year period when they're involved in, essentially, it's 24 lessons. So 24 action plans from each of these different skills. On average, our clients will report for every hour invested in training, they see 4 hours back in efficiencies gained. And for every action plan, the average cost savings for those action plans is typically around ten to $15,000. And that's just for one module. So that's for 2 hours of class of a 48-hour program. And so it's over $100,000 per participant on average that we see. And that's including, we roll in those averages, all the people who don't report results because we can't ignore them. So we're not cherry picking the data. We're saying, okay, for people who report zero, that's what we're going to put in at zero. And it's amazing to look back on that. The CFOs love to look at those numbers and say, okay, this was clearly something that was worth investing in, not just because it gave our people a better sense of, they feel good about the investment in them. They feel good about the progress that they're making. And the guys who like the numbers, and obviously all of us business owners who need to see improvements to our bottom line, really love to see that return that they get for each individual who's involved.
Those are really impressive numbers.
Yeah.
Definitely. Um, if you think about your career, what is the one thing you wish somebody told you, or a leadership program like this was available to you? How do you think it would have changed your career or your opinions or your trajectory? Because we all have these stories of the horrible boss, the great boss, right? And everybody,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you think it would have shaped you?
Well, I think a lot of us are really, really hard on ourselves, and we will internalize. Whether you're part of a layoff, whether you don't get along with your boss, whether you just felt like you couldn't hack it at a company that had super unrealistic expectations, we put that pressure on ourselves. And I will be the first to admit, like, I have very high, very unrealistic expectations sometimes. And I think it would have been really great if I would have learned earlier on that it's not all about me. It's not just about what I should have done better or how I failed or how I, you know, was less than in some way. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. Sometimes you're just not in the right organization, or the organization's values and yours don't line up. And so I would say, if for anybody who's feeling like that, who's feeling like, this is my fault, or this is, you know, I did this because I didn't work hard enough or I'm not smart enough, maybe you're just in the wrong place with a group of people or leaders who aren't valuing the things you're good at. And I think that it's a great opportunity to maybe look at other options out there, and don't don't take it personal, because it could be the team, it could be the other people that you were just not in the right place to thrive.
Sometimes it's just the golden handcuffs. I mean, let's face it, we've all
Absolutely.
companies and the stock options and the bonuses and,
Yes.
the kitchens with the free food. I mean, there's so many people that I was part of the massive layoff at Salesforce. There are so many people I talked to year after the layoff. I wish I could go back and, oh, I can't believe I got laid off. And it was such an amazing company. And I was like, but was it?
Was it?
Were you just really enamored with the fact that you had great health care? Not that I'm knocking great health care, but like I liked the way you phrase that because I don't know that we always challenge ourselves to do better for ourselves. Because sometimes we're more worried about, well, I got to pay the mortgage, so this pays the mortgage.
Yeah.
And engaging with companies like yours actually allow us to pay the mortgage, but maybe take a step back and say,
Mhm.
wait a minute, to your point, is it me?
Yeah.
Which is a big question to ask.
And another thing about these programs is I'm not just focused on making managers better leaders, but when you focus on these areas, whether it's communication or empathy or just understanding our innate bias, it also makes you just a better person. It makes you a better spouse, a better partner, a better community member, neighbor. Like there's so many of these behaviors that are not just important in roles of leadership, but they're important for us to be good to each other. And I think that's another area that's pretty severely lacking in society today.
So Severance, y- don't subscribe to the Severance salad.
Not at all.
Okay, so if people want to find you and learn more about you and the business, where do they find you?
So I just launched my own website, thechristymorgan.com. That has information that is about my background, why I do what I do, and can connect you to set up just a brief chat consultation for us to talk and see how I might be able to help. I'm also on LinkedIn, Kristy Morgan, PMP, and those are probably the best places to find me. You can access all my other content through both of those platforms.
And what's next? What's the big things on your radar
Mm.
that you're ready to tackle next in this new career you've started?
Yeah. So, in addition to just really broadening my network here in the Colorado community, I've leaned into a couple of the groups that I mentioned that I belong to, the PMI Mile High chapter. We have our symposium coming up in April at the Gaylord Rockies. I was almost going to say the Gaylord Texan because that was where I was for too
It's
long.
all the Texas background.
Yeah, yeah, the Gaylord Rockies is where the PMI symposium is being held, and not only is the PMI Mile High chapter one of the largest in the nation, but they put so much into the symposium, and there's gonna be amazing keynote speakers, and my friend Jeff and I are going to be doing a great workshop there. So that's going to be the next platform that you can kind of engage with me. And I want to do more of those one offs and those speaking engagements and getting on stages where I can offer some of the structures, frameworks, and tips and techniques to individuals who maybe aren't able to commit or maybe their organization isn't willing to invest in a 12-month program, but I wanna offer the things that I'm learning and the stories that I can share from my clients with broader audiences. So, happy to talk with anybody who needs a speaker or someone to conduct a workshop because I am all about finding ways to really engage with the community in whatever way works for those individuals.
It's a TED Talk coming soon.
Fantastic.
TED Talk.
Yes.
I think that's on my 2027 plan.
So that vision board is next year.
That's next year.
Well,
Excellent. Well, they'd be lucky to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here and be able to share your wonderful platform because I think there's a lot of things that you all are sharing that I can really relate to as well. And so it's awesome to see we're in different spaces as far as like our industry or our, main company is concerned, but there's so much overlap that I love it.
It is all that transformation and it's all the people. It is what you were saying, it hits perfectly. It's exactly right.
Yeah,
Let's remember the
Perfect.
unit of the room, right?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
As long as we're still dealing human to human in any way, shape, or form, we still matter.
Yeah, we do. Great. Well, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.